So there's this joke that I like to tell, that there was this one time this Unitarian Universalist died, and they arrived at a crossroads with two signs. And one sign pointed to heaven, and the other pointed to a discussion of whether there was a heaven or not. Now, which one would you choose? Well, for this UU, the choice was easy. Without any pause, the UU went down the path towards the discussion of whether there was a heaven or not. Now, we love a good theological debate. Challenging the dominant theological beliefs is a part of our heritage as Unitarian Universalists, and why we say that Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. We aren't tied to any past revelation or sacred text as the be-all, end-all for our faith. We are constantly learning new truths and revising our own beliefs. And now some Unitarian Universalists like to claim that since we are a non-creedal faith, we therefore can believe anything we want. And although our values allow for a wide range of personal beliefs, I would argue that there is indeed a shared Unitarian Universalist theology, and much of which of that has emerged from the heretical traditions of Unitarianism and Universalism. And many of those who we consider our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors struggled with the difficulty of being told what they believed was wrong, that it was heretical. Well, the word heretic actually comes from the Greek heretikos, meaning to choose. Of course, our definition of heretic today implies that the choice in question was made incorrectly, or at least in contradiction with the status quo. For Unitarian Universalists, being heretics is a part of our history. Now, the beginnings of Unitarianism and Universalism in America both emerged from theological disputes with Protestant Christianity. Early Unitarians and pre-Unitarians like Charles Chauncey, Henry Ware, or Theodore Parker constantly argued with other Calvinists about the ideas of human free will and predestination. And early Universalists like John Murray and Caleb Rich challenged the flaws of Protestant Christianity from another angle, convinced that salvation must be for all, instead of for a select few. And both groups were ridiculed, denounced, and rejected. Universalist poet Edwin Markham later wrote, "They drew a circle to shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win, we drew a circle and took them in." Heretics are the ones who are able to choose, the free thinkers, the progressive religious leaders of our faith. And we are also the ones who draw the circle wider, embracing those marginalized communities that have been harmed by the status quo. The history of Unitarian Universalism is inextricably linked with our opposition to authoritarian power structures and far-right violence. The very chalice we light every Sunday is a symbol of that fight that we still continue today. Now, I thought growing up that lighting a chalice was something we'd been doing for centuries, but actually the symbol and ritual of lighting a chalice flame only came around during World War II. During the war, many Unitarians in the United States were very concerned for the well-being of many people living in Eastern Europe, Jews, Unitarians, and many more. And a group came together in Boston to form the Unitarian Service Committee, which is still around to this day as the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. And they came up with ways to help people escaping Nazi-occupied places by passing on messages, finding escape routes, raising money, and working with governments and other organizations for support. But because they were a new organization and didn't have any official paperwork, it was hard to get people to trust them and to get the help they needed. So they asked an Austrian artist, Hans Deutsch, to create a symbol to put on the service committee papers to help them look official. And he decided to combine the chalice cup with a flame representing the healing and holding of community, along with a fire of spirit and justice. Over the years, Unitarian and Universalist communities all over the world started their worship services by lighting a chalice, something that makes me feel at home and connected no matter where I am. And the fact that this beautiful symbol is inextricably linked to our heritage as justice seekers and risk takers and heretics, well, that makes me even more proud. And I want to share with you another little bit about our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Another prominent Unitarian who was involved in our faith around the time of the Second World War, his name was James Luther Adams. He was a minister and theologian, and he visited Germany in 1935, which is not a great time to be visiting Germany. And he expected to be studying some of the greatest theologians of all time, but instead he had to confront the rise of the Nazi regime. And Adams said that in Nazi Germany, he soon came to the question, what is it in my preaching and my political action that would stop this? It is a liberal attitude to say that we keep ourselves informed and read the best papers on these matters and perhaps even join a voluntary association now and then. But to be involved with other people so that it costs and so that one exposes the evils of society requires something like conversion, something more than an attitude. It requires a sense that there's something wrong and I must be different from the way I have been. I must be different from the way I have been. That sounds like something a heretic would say. Now, you may have heard the quote before, often attributed to Martin Luther King Jr., that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. What many people do not know, although probably some of you do, was that this statement was actually first declared nearly 100 years earlier by Unitarian leader Theodore Parker. Now, Parker believed that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. And I think James Luther Adams was arguing that we must be the ones to bend it, and we must choose to bend it. Earlier, I shared with you the story of David and Goliath, retold from one of our many sacred sources, the Tanakh in Judaism and the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. Now, I want you to put yourselves in that position, in the face of the Israelites. For weeks, maybe even months, the Israelites waited on the battlefield. They were fearful to move against Goliath and the Philistines. Civilians were suffering, starving, worried about their family and friends who were out there. And David wasn't a warrior. He didn't have to do anything. He could have delivered his bread and gone back home to his sheep. But he knew that he must be different than the way he had been. Now, David had something that Goliath didn't: faith. And the traditional interpretation of the story generally stops there. Through faith in God, anything is possible. Now, I know that I just got here, but I hope you know me well enough to know that that's not where I'm going to end today. You know, sometimes people ask me why we call our Sunday services worship services, since we're not necessarily worshiping God. And some UUs even reject the word worship entirely and don't like it when I refer to a UU gathering as a worship service. But that's what I love most about our services, that we're not all worshiping God, and even those of us who are worshiping different gods and ideas of God. And when I think about the word worship, it isn't about worshiping some greater unknown power, but about worshiping the space we can all be in together, worshiping our shared humanity. David may have been believing in the strength of God as he approached Goliath, but he was also putting his faith in his people, the Israelites, and his family, waiting for him to return to safety. And to be fair, David also had something else that Goliath didn't have. He had those 5 smooth stones. Now, another sacred source that we hold as Unitarian Universalists is science. And as social scientist Malcolm Gladwell wrote in his book, David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants, those stones and that slingshot was not just a lucky trick. David knew from his experience as a shepherd that a well-slung stone could be more powerful than any amount of human strength, if he knew how to wield it. So the story of David is not just about believing in yourself and your people, but utilizing the tools you have through your own experiences learned how to wield, and doing something that no one else thought you could do. So, if we're David, what are our tools? And who is our Goliath? Theodore Parker believed that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. James Luther Adams believed that we needed to be the ones bending it. If traditional Unitarians and Universalists favored an egalitarian approach to salvation, believing that all are to be delivered from sin and evil after death, modern Unitarian Universalism brings those ideas from the future to the present. We believe in salvation in this life. The idea that not only should universal salvation apply to our souls after death, but also our bodies here on earth. We believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to experience salvation in this life. That is deliverance from sin and evil in this life. As Unitarian Universalists, our theology compels us to devote our lives to the realization of this belief. Our Unitarian Universalist perceptions of free will extend to the realm of evil. Reverend Victoria Safford defines evil as the capacity within us and among us to break sacred bonds with our own souls, with each other, and with the holy. Our free will allows us to choose evil, but it also allows us to choose good. Our belief of salvation in this life includes an obligation to rectify the harm caused and work to help our fellow living beings, whether the evil is intentional, like a sexist remark or contributing to climate change, or unintentional, like a cancer diagnosis or a flood. These instances may be part of the natural order, but we can recognize that they impact some more than others. And while we're not individually responsible for the evil that humankind suffers, we are responsible for how we can act in response. Modern Unitarian Universalist theology can and must be the link between our reality and our actions. For too long, our faith has been content to inch forward, widening the circle ever so slightly, but never enough to fully encompass all of those who need to hear the message of our welcome and our salvation. We've been playing the game of telephone since before even the telephone was invented, choosing to focus on individuality before interconnectedness. And it's my hope that we can draw on the words and deeds of the prophetic people who come before us and move us closer to the liberatory theology that Unitarian Universalists deserve. We are a community of thinkers and seekers. We are heretical saints. We're able to choose, and we have chosen how we want to be in relationship with each other, what we draw our wisdom from, and what we believe. We are a radical, liberal, and theologically rich faith. And like David with his smooth stones, bending his sling towards Goliath, we can use our stones and sling to bend the arc of the universe towards justice.